Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus and today we're going to be reading through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 403, Train Stops 2.0, posted by Clonan. Hello! When playing with trains, you tend to spend a lot of time building train stops. In my latest playtesting, I noticed a few annoyances and pain points, which we'll go into today along with some other improvements for 2.0. So I'm assuming that to mean that all of these changes are coming to 2.0, so everyone will get these in the 2.0 update, and that none of them are locked to the new Space Age expansion. They all seem to be quality of life improvements, so that would make some sense. Train Stops GUI showing on the way. The Train Stops GUI got a new lick of paint for the 2.0 update. Generally, this was to make it conform to the typical layout of the entity GUIs, but I also took the opportunity to add a feature we were missing a little bit. That is the Trains on the Way tab. Now you can tell which trains are coming to the specific stop. I've just done a quick blow up of that here, the screen capture GUI, and basically the part that's been added is this right hand section here. So we've got two tabs, one showing trains with the trains with this stop, which is 246. I'm assuming that's an artifact of the generic system. I mean, if it's not, then that's a remarkable number of trains, and it's interesting that the game can handle that many now. I mean, it could handle that many before, but if we assume that this is a late stage map, late game map, there must be lots and lots of other trains on other planets. Now, it may well be including trains from other planets. I don't know what dividing lines it has, but it's interesting that there's 246 trains with this train stop name. But then the Trains on the Way is the new tab, basically. So it's sort of showing the number of trains and the trains that are heading directly to this stop. So this would presumably dynamically update. So if you had 4 trains that were on the way, say you'd set the train limit to 4 and you've just placed this train and all these new trains are coming in, you would be able to see all 4 in these tabs here, for example. And it does look like there's been a little bit of a tweak to some of the GUI elements. I think the map icon has slightly changed. It was a little bit, in my memory, it's more of a curvy line, but yes, I think there's been a bit of tweaking going on, and we've got some of the new buttons and stuff. Obviously, we're seeing the priority selector, which is one of the new features we've heard about before. Train naming and train limit. There is an important order of operations when setting up a new train stop, and if you do it wrong, you can lead yourself to an unpleasant situation. We've then got an in-game screenshot again, showing a new part of the GUI, and it says, "Oh no, you named the stop before setting the train limit." So what this is again referring to, essentially, is this: you've got this new tab that's showing the trains on the way. It took me a little while to work out what the issue was, in a sense. I mean, you can see loads of trains queued up here. That's the issue, basically. But basically, they've not set the train stop limit. Yeah, so it's unlimited when you don't set a limit. And 102 trains have attempted to come to this stop. Again, I don't know if that's part of this whole new dynamic. You can get it to come to stations that are available and open, etc., etc. Or they've just literally got 102 trains going to an iron plate drop off. But basically, yeah, they've created this station, they've named it, and they've forgotten to set the train limit first, and so 102 trains have attempted to pass to this station. Now, if you then set the limit, but there is a very real possibility here that you would have to manually click on all of these trains and send them out away. So yeah, that would be a real pain in the bum. It's a mistake that you only make a few times, but even the process of setting the limit and colour each time are a bit of a hassle. You could always copy paste an existing stop or use a blueprint, however these options are not always that convenient. So the copy paste, if you're not familiar with that one, it's just you hold shift and you can right click on a station and left to copy the instructions, and then left click on the station you just created to paste it over. You can also literally do the copy and paste, so the Control C, Control V, and you can literally grab a station that you've already got via the map usually, and paste it over the top. Or of course you could have a blueprint set up that is just literally the station and it's got the naming settings on it. I guess the point there is the hassle of setting all of that up and fiddling about with it, basically, and especially if you want to then change it slightly, you might end up with a whole smorgasbord of blueprints that is all a bit of a pain to do. While thinking about it, and while doing it over and over again, build, stop, set limit, set colour, set name, and repeat, I came up with a solution that minimises the risks and at the same time makes it more convenient. When I set the name of a stop, I want it to copy the limit and colour from an existing stop with that name. So just showing this in action with a little video. It says setting the name will copy the limit and colour from an existing train stop. So they're literally just clicking on the edit name icon. It gives a list of stations. They pick a station name, and rather than before, you would have to be setting the limits, etc., etc. It's just using the existing values from the existing stop that you're copying. So we note that a train's on the way clicks over to 1 as well when this is set. So trains on the way 0, trains at this stop 0. Names, they click on that one, we've got 2 and got 1. So it's basically clicking it, copying over the settings. They've got a couple of little points here, a couple of little clarifications. What if there are multiple stops? The safest way is to pick the existing stop with the lowest train limit. What if I set the limit before naming the stop? The limit is only changed if there is no current limit set. So if it's on, enable train limit is just blank, then it will copy over any limit that you've got. Otherwise it will just leave it. If you set it to 4 and your other station's got 2, then it won't copy it over. Train stop name shown when hovered on map. It's a little bit of a clunky name, that one, as it kind of says it all in the title, but the text says, generally, to keep clutter to a minimum, I play with the train stop names not shown on the map. However, very often I want to see what a specific stop is, so I made a simple change. When you hover a stop, it will show the name regardless of the map view settings. So if you're not aware, underneath the map is an icon. I think it literally just looks like a little sort of train coming towards you. And if you click that button, it will toggle on and off the train stop names. Because like this base has a lot of train stops and they're going to be overlapping and getting in each other's way. And it's just going to be general visual clutter on the map. So Clone obviously must turn that off as a default. And occasionally, of course, when you've got, like this, you've got all sorts of exact identical basically stations. So if you're trying to work out which one is, you would have to turn that back on. It might be so visually, all together and too much anyway, and you wouldn't be able to tell what's going on. So now you can simply hover over each station and see what it's called, even if you've toggled the setting off on the map. Train stop shows path of incoming trains. Another small missing thing was a quick indication of where an incoming train was and how long it was going to take to arrive. So this was another easy, simple feature. When you hover over a train stop, it will show the paths of the incoming trains so you can track their progress. And then just literally a screenshot basically showing when you're hovering over the train stop, you can see all of the trains that are pathing in so that you can see how far away they are. When it says how long it would take to arrive, I don't think it means literally. I don't think it gives an actual timer, because you can't see it on this example here. I think it's just literally that thing of, well, it's a very long way away, so it's going to take a long time to get here, or it's very close, so it's going to be soon. I don't think it literally means it will give an ETA of, 3 minutes or what have you to arrive. Copy pasting train stops from the map. Train stations are normally quite big, so it is convenient to navigate them from the map. So it was always a pain needing to zoom in to copy paste to them. So Tobias made it possible to copy paste them from the map view. And just a nice little video illustrating that here from the game again. We've got train depot being copied and pasted to the individual stations to give them all the exact same name. So it's just building on the features that they're already adding in. So basically just another really convenient, really nice quality of life feature if you're doing a lot of train stops and, train stop naming. Rename all train stops. So you spent 500 hours in game copy pasting and naming your stations all consistently, but you made a small typo and named all your orange resource stations Cooper Drop, and now you're stuck with it. But we are not so cruel as to make you rename them all one by one. Now, if you hold Control when confirming the change in the train stop GUI, it will rename all stops with that name to the new name. This feature also works for the new train groups and logistics groups. So just the example here, the point basically is you've typoed and instead of copper, you've written Cooper, and you've not noticed that until way later in the game, and you're using these features, copying and pasting, etc., but you've got 80 copper drops, and basically the point is that when you hit the green apply button, if you hold Control, and it does give you a little pop-up telling you this, apply change, hold Control while submitting to rename all stops with this name. So basically if you hold down the Control, you hit that return, then every name every station that's named what you've originally called it will be changed to what you've just changed it to. So if you've got, I do like, by the way, there's a stop called Get Out of Here. Nice little reference there, but I presume that's basically just I need to get rid of these trains, send them away, and then they path to somewhere else. But yes, basically it will rename all of your Cooper drops to copper drops. Manual locomotive push. With the new elevated rails, we had a new elevated rails problem. What if the train you're riding on ran out of fuel while you were over some water? We don't want the player to get stuck with no way to escape. And I'm assuming it also means that you've not got any fuel on you, because you could just manually put some fuel in. But in the assumption that you've got no fuel, you're obviously way out of the range. I mean, you could well, that's another question, I guess. If you deconstructed a train, you were in, what it would actually do is, I presume, just deconstruct around you, because that's sort of what it does with vehicles at the moment. And you'd be left, so you couldn't basically use the robots to get yourself out of it. So the basic point is you've set off on this journey. You didn't realise, maybe this is your personal train with a bunch of junk in it for you. And you didn't realise that it didn't have any fuel in it. You got halfway across your mega bridge that stretches between two continents, basically, and you run out of fuel. So you've got no way of getting back because, well, I assume this basically means, we're not getting boats. We know we can't walk on elevated rails, etc., etc. So, well, we'll come on to it later, but there's a possibility we are getting jetpacks, so that might have been a solution to this. But yes, so you're trapped over the water. And it says, we brainstormed many ideas, but the simplest and easiest solution won out. Players can push locomotives with their feet, Flintstone style. I genuinely laughed when I saw this next one. It isn't very powerful or fast, so it isn't really usable in normal situations. But for an emergency, it gets the job done. Given that the player can ride wagons, it also naturally means that wagons can be manually pushable too, which is quite a funny sight to behold. And I say, I laughed when I saw this one, because you sort of run up to it, and then what would have been brilliant, I'll be honest, is if I assume you basically, you just press forward. You push the W key, and you move forward, sort of thing. But what would have been brilliant, I say, especially with the Flintstones thing, is if you could see two little feet running underneath the wagon. That would have been amazing. But it sort of makes it. It also lends more credence to my theory that the engineer is some kind of robot or android or something like that, because I don't know if you've ever seen a cargo wagon. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a locomotive. Unless you're world's strongest man, you would not be able to push it. And if you've ever seen them doing train pulls and stuff like that, they use their whole body and lean their entire mass and all that just to get it moving, sort of things. But yeah, I genuinely laughed when I saw this. Remote driving trains. Oftentimes, trains can get themselves into tricky situations and need some manual intervention to get them unstuck. However, if you're off on some other planet having a great time, it would be a massive inconvenience to have to travel home just to fix one deadlock. So just read the thing at the bottom though. So it is accessed through the train GUI or with the normal toggle driving hotkey. There's a toggle driving hotkey? I did not know that hotkey. You learn something new every day. But yes, so basically this is the situation. You've got two trains that are attempting to pass through the same one. I think, well, this is one of the new symbols. I think it means that it's got no path, basically. It can't get to where it was trying to go to originally. Maybe it got blown up or something, or you deleted it. But yeah, it doesn't, it's stuck for some reason. So I honestly can't remember definitely what that symbol is. So it's across there, and it's not going anywhere. This isn't one of those situations where you've poorly signaled or what have you. It's literally just got whatever that icon means is stuck, and so another train is trying to pass through and it can't pass through because this one is blocking the way. And so eventually, I don't know about your entire system, but a heck of a lot of trains would end up deadlocking behind this, and your normal solution would be to go here and manually start shunting trains about. So basically they're giving you the ability to do that remotely. So they're not really coming up with a way of fixing deadlocks in another way. Basically, it's still that you've got to go and manually unmess the trains, unstick the trains, but you can now do it remotely. So, but you would still need to spot it, basically. So you would need to know that you've got it, but now you can do it remotely. So you can, from, say you're on Folgora or something, you're messing about, you don't want to travel all the way back to Nalvis just to unstick some trains, especially simply because it's whatever this problem is, rather than you've messed up the signals, where you'd probably want to be doing a more permanent fix. But basically, yes, you can now click this drive remotely button and do that. Rail Planner works in the map mode. We were missing this feature quite a lot ever since our seeding added blueprinting from the map, so it was a natural addition. Genhis also just finished up super force building support for the rail planner, so crusading over lakes is easier than ever. So basically, this is the ability to use the rail planner such as it is. I hate the rail planner. Remotely from the map. And to be fair, they seem to be using this more as a quick fix to stick, a thing in here, and presumably they'll just whack in some roboports to get it built, using this power or something like that. But it looks like maybe this is just a quick fix, and eventually they'll be properly extending, etc, etc. But basically you can now use the rail planner. We also feature the Grar angry super force building ghost, who's my little favourite when that kicks in. Interestingly, or not interestingly, it's kind of as you'd expect, when it's going over the water here, it does just automatically put in the elevated rail stuff, which is really, really nice. This connection makes no sense because this is a right-hand drive system. So the train, as you can see here, comes down the thing here. So this would have to be connecting over. But the trains going in that direction will be coming out of the other stop. So this is just literally, I mean, it's a demonstration. It's just the idea of it. But they've just connected up a completely useless, thing. Okay. All these small improvements together slowly add up to make the game experience just so much nicer. What do you think? Is there something we have missed? As always, let us know your thoughts at the usual places. So yeah, other speculation points. As noted, it's mostly quality of life stuff and mostly really, really good things. In fact, all really, really good things. I'm not sure why I said mostly, but a lot of it's quite small, let's be frank. But, all really nice to have. I think as a more general speculation point, I think a lot of the reason that a lot of work is being done on the trains is, well, I think there's two kind of drivers for it. The nature of having lots of planets and lots of different materials to move about and extra products and all that sort of stuff means that you naturally end up with a lot more things. If you're moving around all of the current items for the default vanilla game, we haven't heard that we're losing too many things that we can make. So that means we're just getting more and more things to move around. So more science packs, more intermediate items for building, and more buildings and all this sort of stuff. So even just to the extent of a normal playthrough where you're not trying to build a mega base or anything like that, you can end up with a lot more stations. And of course, you're going to be so far remote on a different planet that coming back just to fix, a deadlock, for example, is just going to be too much of a pain in the bum. So they're putting in a lot of quality of life features just because they've been having a lot more friction as they've been doing playthroughs. But I think the other part to it is that I think platforms work like trains, basically. I think they are trains that you can send between planets, basically. And that therefore means that a lot of the things we're getting in for trains are also improvements for platforms. So for example, and I don't know how this one works, because there's the same question here basically, and I think it doesn't matter in a sense for platforms, but if you're on a platform or a platform is going between two planets and it runs out of fuel, how do you get back that platform back? In this scenario where a train had just run out of fuel sort of thing and you're not on board, you could hop in a train, drive over here, and although you can't stand on this track, you could pull up on the other side, you could manually put in some fuel and off it goes, so you're not on it, you're not trapped with it, it's an easy fix. You'd have to work out why it ran out of fuel and fix that, but the basic point is that this is like an edge case where you're the only one on this train, you're the only source of getting fuel, etc, etc, etc. Imagine that same thing happening for the platforms, because they're going to be even worse in the sense that they are properly remote. There is no... Because here, I mean, another solution to this would be to stick in a load of landfill, put a roboport on each and a power pole on each one, build out a set of roboports. Do you know what I mean? So it's a pain in the bum to do stuff like that, but it is fixable. That this moving the platform manually is not really an unsolvable problem. It's just this is a much more convenient way of fixing it. Now, I'm not saying that you can also push platforms, but it tends to me to suggest that these are the type of things they're thinking about. You're getting much more what would be a one-time problem for a train that you would just fix becomes more of an issue with the space platforms, because you couldn't build, a load of roboports out to a platform that's flying between Volcanus and Nauvis, basically. So you need to have more solutions, more remote ways of doing things, more remote things that you can fix, and ways of doing things for space platforms. It's not just about trains, these updates. As I say, I don't know that the fuel one and you pushing it, etc., is necessarily an issue for platforms, because you would want, I guess you could do it as you could have a problem where you've not built it in such a way that it's got the automatic fuel making thing on board. You've maybe messed that up, or you just didn't think about putting it on. But it seems like the idea is really every platform needs to have its own fuel making thing, and then it can just grab passing asteroids. And I think there'll be asteroids everywhere, basically. I think the idea will be that they're an RNG thing, and as you're flying through, they're asteroids, you grab them, you make fuel, weapons, what have you, out of them. So I don't think there'll be barren areas without asteroids. But, of course, your platform could fly off and, there's only 2 asteroids, and then there's a big long pause because of RNG, and so it runs out of fuel and it's just sat there effectively. And if you think about it, that is a deadlock situation potentially, because we don't know how many sort of space lanes we're going to have. Is it just one path between 2 planets? And therefore, if one platform runs out of fuel, every other platform behind it gets stacked up and it's a deadlock. Is that how it works, or are you defining multiple paths to each planet, or they just ignore each other, they ghost through each other, something like that? But as I say, you can imagine situations where if they work like trains, you can get deadlocks with your platforms. And how do you fix that? Well, you've got a remote system there where you can build things on these platforms remotely. We know that you don't need bots for them, when you build on a platform. So if you discover you've forgotten to put on the fuel building, fuel generating part of it, but the platform happens to have its stuff in, or you can send another platform to stand behind it, you could add that on remotely, it will build it, grab some asteroids, and off it goes. But you'd have to do all that remotely, you see. Or like trains, you would need to be able to fly it over there. So I think a lot of these train GUI improvements, why we're getting so much for trains, and of course we could get stuff for bots as well, but we're getting so much for trains because platforms are effectively trains in space. That's my theory anyway. It's quite an interesting base, this one, I must say, overall. All the images seem to have come from the same base. It's almost city block-like, just to give a little interjection. But it's like almost like a mega city blocks. So there's one picture here. Yeah, so this one here kind of shows the sort of structure, and they are sort of like city blocks in a sense, but they appear to be much bigger, and they're not based around a robo-port network being in the center of the block. So it's basically like more like a larger, or I think they're larger anyway. They may be the normal sort of size, but they're 111 trains. It appears to be universally just bi-directional, so trains can come into a station and then go straight out again, sort of thing. They don't need to turn around or go away in any way. But this is basically, I say, it's very city block-like, but it's using the elevated rails a lot. So the upper level here, I believe, it may be the other way around. It's difficult to think it through, but basically, the different 2 colours of line here are the different types of track, one being elevated rail and one being normal rail. And so they're being used presumably to help with the throughput, because it looks like the trains come into a system where, like, the vertical struts, as it were, to the city block appear to be the connecting, or mostly, there are actual stations in there as well, but connecting into the upper level. So if a train wants to go some long distance or what have you, then I imagine it goes into the upper level and it passes through there, because there'd be far fewer junctions, I guess, and all that sort of stuff. And then the horizontal bars, they're basically the lower level, so you have the upper level going across them but without interacting with it. So it's like a bypass in a sense. So it gives presumably a much, much higher throughput. I say there are stations on the bottom part, so the things can come in, and it does look like they're perhaps not even blocks. There are some where for this, for example, this looks like, I mean, it could have been rotated around, I guess, but this looks like a section where all of the vertical places are where the trains are dropping off. And I'm assuming it's the same base. It's the same basic ethos of, trains coming in and out and being 111 trains. But yes, so it is a very interesting base design. It's very train based and appears to be minimal bots. There are some parts where there are being clearly bots used, but it looks like each of these is just like a manufacturing station, and it builds a given amount of a certain product, and it's feeding in as many inputs and outputs as it needs in order to produce that material locally and then send it wherever it's going to send it. Another thing that is just worth noting, on this one here we can see that there is an oil production area basically, so it's being fed into these two stops. But what's interesting about it is that it's got the beacons wrapping around it, like you would expect in a late game base, basically. That tends to confirm, I think, certainly at this point, and I say this does appear to be quite a late game base, that they're not doing anything funky with beacons. There's been a lot of speculation that perhaps beacons would become like SpaceX beacons, where I've not got that far in the game, in the mod, but basically I believe that when you get a higher level tier of beacon, I don't know if there is the normal beacon in there, but the higher level tier of beacon is like you put lots of modules in the one beacon, it covers a much larger area, but you can't overlap them. So you would have like 10 beacons in, or I have to say I've not got there, I don't know how many you put in, but a whole load of modules into the one beacon, rather than having this wraparound thing of loads and loads of beacons. You just have the one beacon covering a very large area. So it looks like they're probably not going down that route and making that change. They're just keeping beacons as they've always been. And I say these also look like normal beacon builds, where you've got a row of normal beacon, 8, they'd be six beacons build, I think, or 8 maybe. But basically just a row of beacons along, bunch of machines in the middle, row of beacons along, bunch of machines, with the yellow parts of the belts there basically along the sides where it's feeding in and out. And I say doesn't appear to be any use of bots in particular on these. I'm sure there is somewhere in the base, and we know, and certainly there's one here where clearly that's a roboport, and those appear to be roboports, I think, unless there's something else. But yes, so in fact that's a point. There is a so the roboports are actually integrated into the middle of the train line. So it is, but it's not got, unless there's some upgrade coming to the coverage for roboports, I don't think that would reach into the middle there. That's sort of too far, I think. For building, yes, but not for the logistics network. So I wonder if the robots are there mainly for building, just so that can be extended remotely from the map. So I'm assuming this is the same base, and this is either an expansion area, which I think is the most likely, or it's a earlier screenshot of the same base. We've now got, these are roboports, obviously, going around the network, going around the train, with the trains. But this is all at the same level. So this is all ground level rail. And therefore, my guess is that this elevated rail, I say it could be because this is late, the other screenshots are later and, they've not unlocked elevated rail yet. That doesn't seem likely because, they've got artillery, for example. And we know that artillery is like an off-planet thing now. So they've clearly done quite a lot to have artillery. Although I guess this could be, a non-space age, playthrough. But anyway, the point, even then, that would be late game, wouldn't it? But basically what I'm saying is that I think it's a two-tier system in a sense, and that perhaps, they lay out this ground level rail network, and then there's like a secondary set of blueprints that go add on basically and turn it into an elevated rail system. Because looking at this, you can sort of see the same core thing. It is different, and so that's why I'm wondering if it maybe is a different playthrough, because there appears to be a crossing point sort of in the blueprint here, but we can only see one stop basically. Oh no, there's one there as well. So there's that's interesting. Got some crossover points there, but not there. Interesting. But yeah, it looks like maybe it's like a two-tier approach to the blueprints, basically, that they add on a second tier of blueprints on top of the rail to give the elevated part. and it therefore connects, because you've got this thing where, you know, it has this additional, that elevation takes it onto a separate system, and it's got this secondary ring around the top, so it would sort of plop down nicely on top. Now, I do think this one is a different base. I don't think this is the same base. It could be, but there's a different philosophy for doing the the stops here. Basically, you know, you've got a different type of drop-off station going on here. And I say these junctions here look to be different as well. No, it's the same sort of idea, isn't it? Oh no, it isn't, because that's on a single side, whereas these are proper double-sided T junctions. So yeah, I think this one is a different base, with a different sort of philosophy going on for how to do the building. I did get very excited at one point. When on this one, there's a drop down, and it has a name on it of Cobalt core, and I got very excited because I thought maybe that's a hint that we're getting Cobalt in the game. And Cobalt's actually used in like lithium batteries and stuff, so it could have been there. But there's a file in the game files called backers.json. You know, when it comes up with the random names of trains, and also roboports, those are backers of the game, basically. And you can actually say there is a backers.json file, and you can actually look through that list of backers. I mean, you can edit it as well if you want and get rid of them all, or put your own things in. But basically, Cobalt Core is listed in that list of backers, so it's clearly just one of the default train names that's come up. So, I mean, we might get Cobalt, but I don't think that's an Easter egg. We're getting to the stage, I'll be totally frank, where you almost don't need to go anywhere and you can play the entire game. There is so much that you can now do remotely, and it doesn't sound like that's a feature that gets, unlocked just for planets. I think you could basically get into a stage of say where you can, manage your entire base just by never leaving. Essentially, you could literally stand there and your entire base on a planet, and to some extent remotely, you could just manage remotely. And especially if you add in Spidertrons and doing things like this, roboports going along all of your train network, etc., you could virtually just, sit in your armchair, or the engineer could sit in its armchair and play the entire game remotely. The other thing I thought it might be worth noting, I suspected we would get a sort of a quieter one this week. And I did post about it on the community tab. I put a little post on there. If you don't check out those, then it's well worth just keeping an eye on those, because I do put little things on there. It's something I'm trying to get better at. But basically, on this video here, which showed the insane speed foundry, okay, what you can actually see in the middle there, it appears to be an arm, basically. So if we zoom right in so that we're insanely close to this image, we can even better see it here. And apologies for this flickery thing, it does get a bit annoying. But we can see here something that appears to be perhaps an arm. Now, the way it's animated, it's like an idle animation, okay? As in the animation of the player stood there, not doing anything, the engineer. It doesn't just, it follows that convention most games do, where there's an animation that plays when you just sat there. The reason it does, I think the reason that's, happens in games is so that you can tell what is, in the very early days of computers when everything was tiny little pictures and, very bitmapped and all that sort of stuff. It enables you to tell what's a character, an NPC, and a player from the background, because it has that animation and it's always massively exaggerated. But the default, the animation for the player in Factorio is basically the engineer just sort of looks around and it just moves its head. It moves its head like a really rapid rate. But it's like a really big looking around. It's not just moving the head, it's sort of fairly animated with it. And so this appears to be doing some sort of idle animation as well. It's also not particularly synced with anything going on. So if it is part of this, foundry, it's out of sync with it by the looks of things. Obviously, it's in sync in the sense that the whole game is on a timing loop and all the animations repeat, so they're going to coincidentally does. But for example, it's not part of this cauldron pouring out liquid, because this happens multiple times between animations happening. The other thing that's interesting to note is the sort of size and position of it. If you imagine the engineer, and it's difficult to tell obviously because we haven't seen the foundry in the game, but if you imagine the engineer sort of next to an inserter, and I could be getting the scale wrong here altogether, but this looks too tall, basically. It looks too high up and too big. So this is where the engineer's shoulders would be. They can't be overlapping with the foundry as such. So their legs, their feet must be sort of here, which seems far too big for what we know the engineer to be. So it's very difficult to tell the perspective on this one. So I may well be completely wrong on that. But what I was thinking is that there's a couple of options there. This is just a big mech suit. That it's some, well, if you look at it, this arm looks like it's some kind of digger tool. Yeah, like it's a JCB. So it looks like it's one of these types of digger tools, like you get on the back of, or an excavator, or a back of a tractor, basically. These sort of excavating tools. It looks to me like that. That sort of thing here is what that looks like, because you notice it's got like the fingery parts on it. It could also be got the part on the top here, and to me, I say, look, that looks like hydraulic things, like for making sure it's grabbing and with power and force. But it could also be weapons, so it could be some sort of laser gun, arm thing that you've got. But yes, so what I think it might be is either a large mech suit, which is used for particular circumstances. What that might be, I don't know. I would love to, if you've got some thoughts and speculation on what it might be, I would love to hear them. But to me, it looks like it's some kind of specialized mech suit, or it could be a remote player avatar, for example. It could be, how we do all this remote stuff from different planets. You can build a robot that is you by proxy. But basically, I think it is the player, and I think it is in a large mech suit is my preferred option. The other thing that I was thinking is that it seems, as I say, very high up. So it could be that it's got a jetpack, that it's hovering basically in a jetpack. We know that SpaceX, and I have got this far in SpaceX, but SpaceX has a jetpack. The reason I don't think it's that, if I'm totally honest, is because you can't fly in space age. Everything you do with the platforms, you're basically hidden away. Building on platforms is done with the item kind of emerging out of the platform and it's self-building, which is amazing. It looks amazing, but you're not running about on the platforms basically. So I don't know why we would get a jetpack, which SpaceX Exploration uses the jetpack in space basically, because you've got no, it has the whole. If you're not touching a surface, you're kind of just floating and you just float forever. So since we can't really do that in space age, and I'm guessing that's why they didn't put it in, so that you didn't have players just continuously complaining about, I've just got flown off into space and died basically. If we're not getting that, the utility of a jetpack, given you can get loads and loads of legs, exoskeleton legs into even a Power Armour Mark II, tends to suggest to me that it's like, because that's your quickest way of moving, and moving around objects isn't all that, or buildings isn't that difficult. So a jetpack seems of relative limited utility in the base game. So I think it's a big suit, basically. And I think because of the digger arm, it's intended for perhaps surviving. We are seeing it against the Foundry. So is that a hint that it's part of Volcanus? And that how the engineer actually survives on Volcanus is with this big mech suit that provides them protection from the crushing pressure, and also protection from lava and protection from fire maybe, and also enables them to dig up the tungsten really, really easily by hand, because although eventually you get the big mining drill and all this sort of stuff, it's perhaps tough to dig up, and you need to mine quite a lot of it for your initial foundry builds and all that sort of stuff. So maybe it's a way of improving hand mining. The reason I'm puzzled by that, honestly, is because hand mining is just rubbish. Why would you do it at all? If you can use normal mining drills, then just use a normal mining drill. It may be super slow, but you'll get it eventually, sort of thing. So I don't know, it doesn't seem like a useful thing to have. It does seem, though, like beefy and robust and augmented. The other thing I thought maybe that it might be is a hint that we're getting sort of properly modular armour. At the moment, when you get modular armour, all it means is that you get an equipment grid and you can put in what you want in the equipment grid. You can't change, your legs or your arms, or you can't change the arrangement of your actual armour. So I wondered if maybe this was a hint that we'll get to be able to put on a big digger arm if we want a big digger arm, sort of thing. Even if it's just cosmetic, it would be awesome. But yes, so all sorts of possibilities there as to what it is, from a tiny little arm wiggling about. But yeah, so that was the other thing I thought might be worth having a bit of a chat about, especially as there weren't too many points of speculation in this. And I say, I would absolutely love to hear your theories on what this is, and what you think about the train improvements and my theory that space platforms will work like space trains, basically. Just to note, unfortunately there won't be a Friday Facts video on Friday next week. There will be a Friday Facts video, but it will not be on Friday. That's because I'm taking a little break for Easter, so the Friday Facts videos will return on Tuesday. I still this thing of pushing a whacking great cargo wagon along is just brilliant. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you'd like to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio every Saturday on my Twitch channel at Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers.